Hi, my name is Elizabeth Benneman, and I'm going to be your child's teacher this year. We have a lot to look forward to and a busy year in the second grade classroom. Before I begin telling you about my math classroom, I want to give you a little information about myself. I grew up in the little town of Tripp, South Dakota. After high school, I went on to continue my education at Dakota State University, where I majored in elementary education. If you ever need to get a hold of me, here's a list of my phone number, email, and website. If you ever have any questions, always feel free to contact me. Okay, so what will my math classroom look like? First, what I teach in my classroom is based off of the Common Core State Standards. What are the Common Core State Standards? They are a list of what students should know at each grade level. They were created by teachers and experts to establish consistent standards across the states. These standards work to ensure that when students graduate high school, they are prepared for college and the workforce. I use these standards to know what I will teach your child. They do not tell me how to teach your child. In second grade, the content that Common Core tells me to teach are understanding numbers and how they compare to each other, using place value to solve addition and subtraction problems, units of measure such as centimeters and inches, and understanding different shapes and their characteristics. I'll be teaching these and other standards throughout the year. The Math Common Core State Standards also have a list of math practices students should learn. These are behaviors students should do as they work with math problems. Some examples that I will focus on in second grade are make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, model with mathematics, and use appropriate tools. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them is important because it teaches students to keep trying and not to give up when a math problem seems too hard. Teaching problem-solving skills and steps helps students solve many different kinds of problems and teaches them to become problem solvers in their own life. Now, modeling with mathematics is showing math in a real way, like using blocks or objects. And using appropriate tools means to use tools when they are needed, like calculators, rulers, and paper and pencil. All of the math practice standards are important to work on as your child progresses through the school year. So now, in what ways will I teach these standards in the classroom? I will use multiple strategies, including Math Talk, a problem of the day, math journals, and collaborative learning. First, Math Talk. Math Talk is when students talk about math and how they solved problems with in-depth class discussions. These conversations help me to understand if my students have a deep knowledge of what we're working on and how my students best learn. Some Math Talk moves I use in the classroom are to ask students to discuss their thinking. If another student agrees or disagrees with what another student said, ask students to add on to what other students said, and to have students repeat in their own words what they heard. I think it's very beneficial to have these math talks so students understand concepts at a deeper level. In my classroom, I have students work through a problem of the day. I always try to connect these problems to real-life experiences, or very interesting experiences. My goal of the problem of the day is to get students to think about a real-life situation in a mathematical way. One example is to show students this video.
Since it turns out we like reporting on cheating in sports, here's today's Is It Cheating news. When the University of Wisconsin football team scores, the team and all its fans are very happy. The mascot for the team, Bucky the Badger, I'm sure is also happy. But that happiness is tempered because every time new points go up on the Wisconsin scoreboard, Bucky Badger, the mascot, has to do push-ups for every point that Wisconsin has put on the board. So Wisconsin scores a touchdown and an extra point, Bucky does 7 push-ups. Then they score a field goal. The Wisconsin score goes from 7 to 10, and Bucky does 10 push-ups. 10 more push-ups, I should say. If Wisconsin then scores another touchdown, an extra point, and their score goes to 17, Bucky then does 17 more push-ups, putting his total push-up tally by that point of the game up to 34. Here's the problem, which has given rise to the mystery. On Saturday, the Wisconsin football team scored 83 points. Wisconsin 83, Indiana 20. Wisconsin scored 83 points.
After I show this video, I would have students start thinking about it and have a conversation about how we can solve the problem. The question from this video would be, how many push-ups did Bucky do during the entire game? These kinds of problems get students to think about what information they need and how they're going to go about solving the problem. I also use math journals in my classroom. I have students write many different things in these journals throughout the year, and I then read them to get an idea of what my students are thinking. Some questions I have them answer are how they solved the problem of the day, when did you have to use math during this last week, how do you feel about place value, And what are some steps you use to solve word problems? I use math journals as an assessment and give students participation points when I grade them. Lastly, I use collaborative learning. I believe students can learn just as much from each other as they can from me. During class, I often have students talk with partners or work in groups to solve problems. I include collaborative learning because I also want students to be comfortable with each other in my classroom. I believe this helps students feel at ease during class and are more willing to participate in math discussions. So what kind of tools do I use with these strategies? With these teaching strategies, I often use manipulatives and technology in my classroom. Manipulatives are objects that help students visualize math. One manipulative that I use in the classroom is base 10 blocks. I use these blocks to help students understand numbers, and they help when they are working on adding and subtracting. I also use Cuisenaire rods when I am teaching about measurement. These are wooden rods that come in many different lengths. They help students visualize the different lengths and compare the rod's measurements. I use technology in the classroom as well. We are fortunate enough to be a one-to-one school, so that means every student has their own iPad. I utilize this fact by using many different apps during class and for extra practice. Some apps I love to use are Motion Math Pizza, Quick Math, and Kakuma. All of these apps are game-based and fun ways to work on math. I use these apps as a way to have students get extra practice on their math skills. I also use a couple online math programs such as Khan Academy and iExcel Math. These programs let students learn at their own pace and help them with math skills they need work on. Using technology is an important part of the classroom because it helps students learn how to use technology, and the apps and programs I use are fun and engaging, making students want to learn. Technology is also individualized and can help each individual student with what specific skills they need to work on. Now, how do I assess my students? I use many methods to help me assess if my students are learning. I use math journals, quizzes, projects, observations, conferences, and questions. I use a mix of formative and summative assessments to help guide my teaching. During class, I use conferences, questions, and observations to see how my students are doing. I also use quizzes and projects to understand if my students have met the standard we are working on at the time. I will use all of these forms of assessment to determine how your child is progressing and when I may need to reteach a topic to the class. The last thing I wanted to talk about is how I will be communicating with you and how you can communicate with me. I will have a class website that you can visit to see daily updates of the class, a list of apps you can have your child practice with, and a schedule. I will also be sending home a newsletter with your child every month. This newsletter will talk about what's coming up in the next month and what math skills we'll be working on. I will put these newsletters also on my website every month, so you can look at them as online as well. Another way I communicate is through email and phone. If I need to get in contact with you about your child, I will either send you an email or give you a phone call if it's more urgent. These are also ways you can easily get a hold of me about any questions you may have throughout the entire year. During the year, I will be talking with you about your child's progress at parent-teacher conferences. I use this time to tell you how your child is doing in class and to ask you of any ways I can better help your child learn. I believe including parents and students' learning is very important and helpful. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for me at this point? Okay, the question was, do you have any resources that I can use at home with my child? In class, I use many resources like online programs and iPad apps. I mentioned a few earlier, Motion Math Pizza, Kakuma, and Quick Math, but I do have a longer list of all the apps you can have your child use at home on my website. If you need a paper copy, I am happy to print one out for you. I also have a list of online programs that you can use. A couple that I mentioned are Khan Academy and iExcel Math, but there are quite a few more that are very helpful. If you have any questions about these resources, just let me know. Are there any more questions? Great question. The question was, what are those colored rods that I see in the back of your classroom? Those colored rods are a manipulative called Cuisenaire rods. I briefly talked them earlier today. I use these when students are learning about measurements. I have students estimate the lengths of different rods and compare them to the other rods. Then I have them measure the rods with a ruler in inches and in centimeters. I like using the Cuisenaire rods to teach about measurement because they come in many different lengths and help students compare those lengths. Thank you all for coming. I hope today helped you get an idea of what your child will be experiencing in my classroom this year. Again, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm excited for the school year ahead and look forward to teaching your children. Thank you again.